Celebrity Everyday 26.
As tremendous as Star Wars may be, there have been many stumbles in the franchise's 48-year history, but the passage of time has meant a lot have been fixed. When the first Star Wars movie released back in 1977, even George Lucas himself never expected it to be the beginning of a franchise that would last for almost half a century and counting. The genius of Star Wars lies in the seamless blend of familiar tropes and archetypes with a wonderfully fresh and original galaxy, resulting in a story that left viewers captivated. That doesn't mean Star Wars is faultless, of course. Course corrections led to so many plot holes and retcons, and some scenes now feel rather awkward in light of later revelations. Think The Empire Strikes Back's Luke Leia kiss. Because Lucas tapped into popular culture of the time, both with the original trilogy and the prequels, some story elements haven't dated well. There were even story mistakes, with later revisions added to try to fix them. Here are the biggest mistakes and missteps that have been fixed by the franchise since its launch in 1977. Let's start with one of the most controversial moments in Return of the Jedi, Slave Leia. In this scene, Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia is held prisoner by Jabba the Hutt. He reduces the strong and confident rebel leader to a sex symbol, chained to his side, and even gives her a grotesque lick. George Lucas wanted to tap into popular fantasy tropes, pointing to fantasy artist Frank Frazetta as inspiration. Associated with covers for the Conan the Barbarian books, Frazetta's art featured women as either skimpily clad damsels to be rescued or seductresses who had to be vanquished. To be fair to Lucas, the plot of Return of the Jedi subverts this trope. As Fisher herself came to realize, Leia ultimately takes the chains that have bound her and uses them to throttle Jabba to death with them. But let's be honest, that isn't why the look is remembered. Fisher prophesied that the gold bikini was what supermodels will eventually wear in the seventh ring of hell, and she was right. For a time, there were rumors that Disney had decided to discontinue any merchandise associated with Slave Leia back in 2015. This was based on a comment from Cheesecake comic cover artist J. Scott Campbell, but no official statement was ever made. Then, in 2016, author Claudia Gray spotted an exciting movement in the fandom that allowed her to reinterpret the gold bikini in her tremendous novel Bloodline. As she explained to MovieWeb, even George Lucas knew he made a mistake killing Darth Maul in Star Wars, Episode I, The Phantom Menace. The Sith Lord had one of the most imposing and impressive designs in the franchise's history and figured prominently in marketing for the prequels. In the end, though, he had only a handful of scenes and a little dialogue before he was cut down by a Jedi Padawan. It was such a waste, and Lucas swiftly realized he'd made a misstep. He even considered having Maul return as General Grievous in Star Wars, Episode III, Revenge of the Sith. Fast forward to Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and Lucas dropped a bombshell on the creative team he'd assembled by revealing he wanted to resurrect Darth Maul. This was eventually accomplished through a combination of cybernetic technology and Night Sister magic, and it didn't take long for Maul to become the Clone Wars' most compelling villain. A third party during the Clone Wars, Maul battled both the Jedi and the Sith, adding a wonderful degree of complexity and nuance to the story. Thankfully, the fan reaction to Best's return was an absolute delight to see. He was celebrated by the fandom, welcomed and treated with honor. It was just what he deserved after his awful treatment in the 2000s. It can only be hoped that Kelleran Beck will return. Best is already, even getting to voice Jar Jar again in LEGO Star Wars. Rebuild the Galaxy, The Mandalorian leans heavily into American Western mythology and has returned to Tatooine several times. But there were hints of a shift, with Din Djarin speaking to Tuskens rather than fighting them, and visibly unimpressed by the constant conflict between the Tuskens and Tatooine settlers. Then came the Book of Boba Fett, which saw Boba inducted into the Tuskens, finally portraying them in an empathetic light and developing their culture. The story isn't perfect. Some have critiqued it for having an element of the old white savior trope. But it's a massive step forward for Star Wars, in that it turns an established trope on its head. For the first time, viewers were expected to empathize with the Tuskens, even to celebrate their attacks on a train. Anakin's Attack of the Clones atrocity retroactively looks even worse, and the casual racism of the past has now been discarded. The clones debuted in Star Wars, Episode II, Attack of the Clones, and the movie wasn't exactly subtle about setting them up as proto-stormtroopers. Nobody was particularly surprised when the clones turned on the Jedi in Revenge of the Sith, executing Order 66 at Palpatine's command. The problem for Lucas, though, was that he wanted the clones to be more sympathetic, especially when he began working on the Clone Wars animated show. Lucasfilm settled on an incredibly smart fix, with the TV show revealing the clones had been implanted with inhibitor chips that were activated when Palpatine uttered those fateful words. As soon as the Sith Lord spoke, they were effectively reduced to slaves, and they gunned down the Jedi ruthlessly. Their lack of free will meant Order 66 was a tragedy for the clones as well as the Jedi, and viewers could root for the clones without any dissonance. Jar Jar Binks became one of the most controversial characters in the Star Wars prequel trilogy, although his reputation has improved in recent years. That said, he deserves mention on this list for a far more disturbing reason: the fan reaction. Voice actor Ahmed Best came close to taking his own life after the backlash.
Celebrity Every Day 26.